An outpouring of grief from really both sides of the aisle, even those that did not necessarily agree with her political positions or her positions on jurisprudence, certainly expressing grief at the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg at age 87. Complications related to cancer is what we are being told. And obviously, she was very much the heart and soul of the left wing of the Supreme Court for well over 2 decades. Consider it a bit of a role reversal compared to 4 years ago when Republicans blocked Barack Obama's Supreme Court nominee during an election year. Now expect this fight to trickle down into the must-watch U.S. Senate race in North Carolina. One of the contenders in that matchup, of course, was here in Washington back in 2016. Senator Thom Tillis. Listen to what he had to say back then versus now. February 2016, Senator Thom Tillis took to the Senate floor just days after the passing of Justice Antonin Scalia. With President Barack Obama poised to offer a Supreme Court nominee, he argued it was not time to move forward with the Supreme Court confirmation fight. Explaining why, he pointed to the election.
It is essential to the institution of the Senate and to the very health of our republic not to launch our nation into a partisan, divisive confirmation battle during the very same time the American people are casting ballots to elect our next president.
Tillis reiterated this argument months later in an August op-ed in USA Today, writing, "Voters, not a lame duck president, should decide the composition of the highest court in the land." President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, ultimately was never confirmed by the Republican-led Senate. Flash forward to another election year with another Supreme Court vacancy. This time, Tillis is not objecting to President Donald Trump moving ahead with a nomination, suggesting he's prepared to vote for Trump's pick. In a statement, he wrote, 4 years ago, a Supreme Court vacancy arose under divided government and a lame duck president as Americans were choosing his successor. Today, however, President Trump is again facing voters at the ballot box. Senator Tillis is up for re-election, and his challenger in the race, Democrat Cal Cunningham, is leaning on Tillis's argument from 2016, writing, "North Carolinians are already voting. They deserve that opportunity to have their voices heard, and then it should be up to the next president and next Senate to fill the vacancy on our court." Will all of this political role reversing mean anything to most voters? Davidson College political science professor Susan Roberts says probably not.
You know, it's power and it's politics. I think that it's one of those things where it won't make much difference. What it will do is activate that pro-life, pro-choice view on access to the abortion.
Now, Justice Ginsburg will be honored throughout the week, lying in repose in the court building behind me for 2 days before lying in state at the U.S. Capitol just across the street. Reporting at the Supreme Court, I'm Kevin Frey, Spectrum News 1. Not a lot of people know many of the members of the Supreme Court, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one name that perhaps more than the others kind of resonated publicly. And it's kind of astounding, really, that an 87-year-old woman had a nickname like the notorious RBG that kind of resonated not only with the people that follow politics, but people across the country, especially younger women who looked up to her and were inspired by her. And so that is why, as you mentioned, we saw such an outpouring here at the Supreme Court over the weekend. I walked up here just to kind of get a sense of the lay of the land, and there were so many flowers everywhere, signs, etc. People coming, paying their respects, offering a moment of mourning for the passing of this justice who had such an impact, especially when it comes to gender equity issues in this country over her lengthy legal career, not only during her more than 2 decades on the bench, but also in the years leading up to that. She argued several cases before the Supreme Court. As I was trying to skirt too much politics on a day when we're trying to honor the justice, but it goes without saying, and she herself hinted at the situation in those last kind of remarks that were released to NPR, that there is politics at play here. And if you remember back in 2016, Republicans never even gave consideration to Obama's nominee to replace a more conservative Justice Antonin Scalia, who died during an election year back in February of 2016, was never given a hearing. And now we're just a few weeks away from an election. Will Donald Trump actually be the president come January? That remains in question. We'll find that out sometime in November. And so the Democrats are now calling foul, some calling the Republicans hypocrites for moving ahead with this. And so there is plenty of politics at play that after these next few days are going to really hit the ground running, we expect. The Republicans, including both from North Carolina, both very much open, it seems, to voting to confirm a justice. Thom Tillis in particular suggesting he's all but ready to vote in support of any yet unnamed nominee. Well, I'm glad, Justin, you were just touching on something that I wanted to bring up. John Roberts, I believe it was speaking, and he made note, I believe the exact quote was that she was not an opera star, but she found her stage, obviously that stage being the judicial arena. And of note, and the reason that he brought that up is she was an immense lover of the opera, often attended performances here in Washington. Speaking personally, I was at one once when she walked in, and she got a standing ovation as she arrived. So she was beloved in that sense, and she loved the theater. She viewed it as her one escape, telling one outlet, telling at one event that she did, how much that kind of allowed her to compartmentalize everything, that she would often go to sleep thinking about the various court cases she was working on, but going to the opera, seeing these performances allowed her to kind of escape and put her mind at ease and just kind of focus on the music in front of her for a moment. Good evening. Washington is in mourning tonight, and some of the folks that I have a chance to talk to describe the person they're honoring as both small in stature, yet strong and powerful in spirit. Now, Justice Ginsburg's casket rests atop the steps on the Supreme Court building behind me, allowing the public to pay their respects while being socially distant.
She represented hope for a lot of people.
Tavia Spratt came to the court today to reflect and to say thanks. Born in Charlotte and now working in the medical field in the Washington area, she says the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was an inspiration.
Without a woman like her, there wouldn't have been a thought in my head that I could do something like this, that I couldn't, if I wanted to be a lawyer, go do that. If I wanted to be a doctor, I could do that.
Lining the steps of the Supreme Court this morning, Justice Ginsburg's former law clerks welcomed her back one last time to the building she called home for more than 2 decades. At a private ceremony, Chief Justice John Roberts remembered his colleague.
Among the words that best describe Ruth, tough, brave, a fighter, a winner, but also thoughtful, careful, compassionate, honest. When it came to opera, insightful, passionate. When it came to sports, clueless.
The heart of the liberal wing of the court, she was close friends with her ideological opposite, the late Justice Antonin Scalia. An advocate of gender equity, she fought discrimination throughout her legal career, both personally and in the courtroom. In doing so, she paved the way for many other women to join the legal profession, like Teresa Cunningham, who drove down from Pittsburgh this morning with her friends from law school.
I've been a lawyer for 30 years. I've seen major differences between the time I graduated from law school and now for the other women who've come behind me. And I think she inspired each of us to be a little bit of a trailblazer of ourselves for those to come behind us.
Now, with Justice Ginsburg's passing, Spratt and others say they're ready to pick up the baton.
Rest well, because you deserve it, beautiful lady. And the fight goes on.
Now, Justice Ginsburg will lie in repose here at the Supreme Court for the rest of the day, and also tomorrow she will lie in state at the U.S. Capitol on Friday. Reporting at the Supreme Court, I'm Kevin Frey, Spectrum News 1. And we expect some music. There will be remarks, reflections on her life, and among other people that will be visiting today, our understanding is former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris, obviously the Democratic ticket in this fall's campaign. She, of course, was such an advocate for women's causes, for gender equity, as we have discussed over the past few days, both during her time as a lawyer before the court. She appeared several times fighting for various causes, often in tandem with the ACLU, and then also during her time on the bench, where she, among other things, wrote the dissent in a case dealing with pay equity. As Congressman David Price and I discussed earlier this week, that kind of helped craft and helped lead to Congress taking action on pay equity toward the beginning of Barack Obama's terms. We did ask a law professor at NC Central to reflect on her legacy, especially when it comes to before her time getting on the bench. Here's what she told us. Right, so a through line that you're hearing from a lot of the Republicans in recent days within our delegation, and they often point to the relationship that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had with Justice Antonin Scalia, who was basically her ideological opposite on the court. He passed away 4 years ago in 2016 and ultimately led to that feud that we saw. His passing led to that feud that we saw on Capitol Hill between the Obama administration and Senate Republicans. But their relationship, despite their differences, was very close-knit. They shared a love of opera. There is a famous photo of them riding an elephant together during a trip to India that Chief Justice John Roberts mentioned during his comments during the ceremony that they had at the court earlier this week. And so in that sense, and she commented on this, they were able to attack each other's ideas, but they didn't attack each other. And that is something that Republicans like Congressman Ted Budd touched on when I talked to him just yesterday. Well, good evening. Justice Ginsburg, even in her own death, is forging new ground, breaking barriers, becoming the first woman and first person of the Jewish faith to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol.
Ready, stop.
A tribute for an icon of the court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the second woman ever to serve on the nation's highest bench, lying in state at the U.S. Capitol.
As a lawyer, she won equality for women and men, not in one swift victory, but brick by brick, case by case, through meticulous, careful lawyering.
Her absence on the court quickly sparking a new round of division in Washington, with President Donald Trump poised to nominate a conservative to replace the longtime progressive heart of the court. The bench stands to move ideologically to the right. That has Democrats like Representative David Price sounding the alarm, especially with a case regarding the Affordable Care Act scheduled for oral arguments just days after the election.
A lot is at risk. The most immediate thing that is at risk is the health care decision that's being argued at present. And with Ruth Bader Ginsburg not in the mix, I think the chances of the Affordable Care Act being ruled unconstitutional are much, much greater.
If the president proves successful in replacing Ginsburg, some Democrats are toying with expanding the court if they gain control of the Senate and White House on Election Day, adding additional justices to help balance the bench. That has Republicans calling foul. Congressman Ted Budd among those co-sponsoring a constitutional amendment proposal to cap the Supreme Court at 9 seats.
This, through history past and through the future of our country, 9 is fine. It's for the last quite some time, it's been stable at 9.
Now, this blossoming fight stems in part from the Republicans' decision to move forward with President Trump's nominee in the middle of an election year, 4 years after they blocked President Barack Obama's nominee, also during an election year. Now, as for Ginsburg, she will be laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery in the coming days, alongside her beloved husband, Marty. In Washington, Kevin Frey, Spectrum News 1.